My fiancé offered to save the print shop my father left me. Then I read the one paragraph he had already highlighted for my signature. The document was only 4 pages long. That is the detail I keep returning to, because 4 pages should not have been enough space to hide a second version of my life. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. Rain tapped against the front windows of Bell Street Press, and the old paper cutter made its usual soft ticking sound as the building cooled. I was sitting at the counter where my father used to drink coffee from a chipped blue mug and argue with customers who wanted wedding invitations by Friday. Across from me, Adrian turned his laptop around. "Last thing," he said. "Sign where I marked it, and I can start fixing the supplier mess tomorrow." He smiled when he said it. Not a villain smile, not anything I would have recognized as danger. It was the patient, affectionate smile of the man who had spent the previous month telling me I did not have to carry everything alone. A yellow digital flag waited beside a blank signature box. I picked up the stylus, then stopped. "I'm going to read it first." The change in him lasted less than a second. His shoulders dropped, his mouth tightened. He looked toward the ceiling and released a long breath. The kind people use when a child insists on tying her own shoes while everyone is late. "Mara," he said, "we have been over all of this." We had not. We had talked about paper invoices. We had talked about a supplier who had frozen our account. We had talked about one missing payment that had bounced between 2 banks for 9 days. We had not talked about the sentence on page 3. I read it once, then again, then a third time, because the words were ordinary enough to make me doubt what they did when arranged together. The document authorized Adrian to communicate with vendors, approve substitutions, negotiate balances, redirect refunds, amend payout instructions, and act as the shop's sole administrative representative, not for the frozen order, not for 30 days, not until the missing payment was found, for every current and future supplier relationship, until he chose to surrender that role, or I revoked it through written notice delivered to every affected party. I looked up. "What is this?" He did not lean over to see which line I meant. That told me he already knew. "It's standard," he said. "It makes you the only person allowed to change where money gets sent. It makes me the point of contact. That is the whole reason you asked for help. I asked you to call Northline Paper. And next month it will be the ink company, then the equipment lease, then some customer deposit that got coded wrong. Do you want to rebuild the same permission every time?" His voice stayed calm. Mine did not. "That is not your decision." His chair scraped back from the counter. "No, apparently my role is to clean up problems while you reserve the right to treat me like a stranger. There are arguments that begin when someone raises a voice. This one began when I noticed he had prepared his defense before I found the offense. 3 months earlier, I would have signed. I knew that because 3 months earlier my father died, and grief had turned every ordinary task into a hallway with no doors. Bell Street Press had been his shop for 31 years. He bought it when the block still had a shoe repair place, 2 family grocers, and a movie theater that charged less for the matinee. By the time I was old enough to see over the counter, I knew how to stack cardstock by weight, and how to tell when the black ink drum needed changing from the faint gray stripe at the edge of a page. I also knew that my father loved the work more than he loved systems. He remembered every customer story and almost none of their account numbers. He could match an ivory invitation stock from memory, but kept supplier passwords on folded receipts. He could coax another year from a machine everyone else had declared dead, then forget to deposit 3 checks sitting under his calculator. When his heart stopped in July, the shop did not stop with him. Orders still came due. The phone still rang. A school needed 600 programs. A restaurant needed menus before its reopening. A bride stood at the counter crying because the gold on her invitations looked green under the lights at her venue. People told me to take time. The invoices did not. I had worked beside my father for years, but he had kept the business wrapped around his own habits. Taking over felt less like inheriting a shop and more like waking inside someone else's unfinished sentence. That was when Adrian became indispensable. He was not a printer. He worked in operations for a regional furniture company, which meant he spoke the language of systems, permissions, vendors, and escalation chains. He loved a clean dashboard. He believed every recurring problem was an insult, waiting to be converted into a process. At first, that belief felt like rescue. He built a spreadsheet of outstanding orders. He sorted the unopened mail. He found 2 subscriptions my father had paid for twice. He sat beside me on the floor of the back office until midnight, labeling boxes while I told stories about my father and cried into a sleeve dusted with paper fibers. When I apologized for being a mess, Adrian kissed my forehead. "You are not a mess," he said. "You inherited one." That sentence made me love him more. It also made it easier not to notice how often his help came with a diagnosis of me. I was too trusting with customers, too sentimental about old equipment, too slow to send overdue notices, too willing to answer the phone myself, too anxious when a number did not match, too scattered to manage passwords. Each criticism arrived wrapped in usefulness. "Let me do it." That was his phrase. Let me call. Let me organize it. Let me write the response. Let me put everything under one login so you stop losing track. When relief is scarce, competence can feel exactly like kindness. I began giving him pieces of the shop because every piece he took made my hands feel lighter. He answered supplier emails from my desk. He negotiated a late fee down. He moved our shared calendar into an app he preferred. He created rules in the business inbox so messages landed in folders with names I did not understand. If I asked where something had gone, he would show me, but there was always a small lesson attached. This is why we need a system. This is why you cannot run a business from memory. This is why your father left you such a maze. The last sentence hurt, and he knew it. He apologized immediately. He brought dinner to the shop. He rubbed my shoulders while I checked proofs. Caring, attentive, disciplined, ambitious. Those words described him perfectly. They just did not answer the question I had not yet learned to ask. What happens when a capable person begins to believe capability gives him jurisdiction? The supplier crisis arrived on a Friday. Northline Paper had been shipping to Bell Street Press since before I was born. That week, our regular order never came. When I called, a woman in billing told me our balance showed 2 unpaid invoices, and the account had been placed on hold. I knew I had paid them. At least I believed I had. Belief is a fragile thing when grief has been eating holes in your memory. I searched the bank portal, the desk drawers, and 3 email folders. One payment appeared to have left our account, but Northline had no record of receiving it. The second invoice had been sent to an address my father stopped using years ago. We had enough paper for 4 days. The school programs were due in 6. I called Northline twice and got transferred until the line disconnected. On the 3rd attempt, I started crying before anyone answered. Adrian took the phone from my hand. "Go home," he said. "I will handle it. I need to know what happened. You need sleep." He was right about the sleep. That was how he won most arguments then. He placed one true thing beside one thing I had never agreed to and asked me to accept them as a pair. I went home. By Saturday afternoon, he had mapped the problem. The missing payment had been sent with an incomplete reference number. The old invoice could be paid immediately. Northline would release the shipment if someone completed a supplier authorization and confirmed the shop's banking details. "That's it?" I asked. "That's it." I nearly laughed with relief. He said he would prepare the paperwork because Northline's form was vague and we should send something cleaner with it. I thanked him. I told him I did not know what I would do without him. He held my face in both hands. "That is what partnership is," he said. On Sunday, he mentioned that it would be easier if vendors dealt with him from then on. I said that sounded fine while we got through the holiday rush. On Monday, he asked for a list of our accounts. I sent it. On Tuesday, he brought the document. Now I sat beneath my father's old wall clock and stared at the phrase, "Sole Administrative Representative." Adrian walked toward the front window, then back. "You are making this sound sinister because legal language scares you." "It does not scare me. I understand it." "Do you?" That question was soft. It landed harder than if he had shouted. He pulled the laptop toward himself and scrolled quickly. "This is an authorization. You can cancel it. After notifying every company you gave it to." "Yes, because that is how written authority works. And you can redirect refunds to the correct shop account." "It does not say that." He looked down. For the first time, his certainty paused. I pointed to the line. It says you can amend payout instructions. It does not name an account. It does not require my approval. It does not even require you to tell me. He closed the laptop halfway. I would never steal from you. I had not used the word steal. The rain seemed louder in the silence that followed. I did not say you would. You implied it. I am asking why you wrote yourself permission to do something you say you would never do. He stood very still. Then he gave me the answer that finally cleared the fog. Because if I have to ask you before every decision, nothing will improve. Not because the supplier required it, not because the language was standard, not because the shop needed speed, because my consent was inefficient. I looked around Bell Street Press as if I had entered after years away. The sample books my father refused to throw out, the brass bell over the door, the little black smudge near the register that no cleaner had ever removed. The framed first dollar, faded almost white. The shop was disorganized, vulnerable, behind. It was also mine. Not mine because I was the smartest person in the room. Not mine because I had never lost an invoice. Not mine because grief had somehow spared my concentration. Mine because my father had left it to me, along with every beautiful and infuriating consequence of that choice. Adrian had been helping me stand inside that responsibility. Somewhere along the way, he had decided my weakness was an opening. I asked him whether he had sent the document to anyone. He crossed his arms. No. Did you tell Northline you would be the permanent contact? I told them I was taking over administration. My skin went cold. You told them before I signed? I told them the plan. Your plan. Our plan. No. It was the quietest word I had spoken all night. He blinked. I said it again. No, there is no our plan. There is the one phone call I asked you to make, and there is this. I tapped page 3. He started listing everything he had done for me. The duplicate subscriptions, the late fee, the calendar, the boxes, the nights on the office floor. Each kindness returned as an invoice. I listened until he ran out. Then I asked, were you helping me because I needed help, or were you building a case that you should be in charge? His face changed. Not guilt, injury. That frightened me more. He truly believed gratitude should have made the question impossible. You know what? He said, do it yourself. Keep every broken little system exactly the way your father left it. But do not call me when this place swallows you too. He took his coat and walked out. The brass bell shook above the door long after it closed. I stayed at the counter. The document remained open on the screen. The signature flag glowed yellow beside the blank box, bright and almost cheerful. For a few minutes, shame flooded in exactly where his help had been. Maybe I was ungrateful. Maybe the wording was clumsy. Maybe a person who had spent weeks helping me deserved more trust than a hostile reading of one paragraph. Maybe grief had made me suspicious. Maybe losing my father had made every transfer of control feel like another death. Then I remembered the sigh. Not the clause. The sigh. He had not been surprised that I misunderstood. He had been annoyed that I checked. A person who wants your agreement explains. A person who wants your signature hurries. I printed the document. The shop printer delivered each page with a mechanical hum. On page 3, I circled the clause in red pen. Then I wrote the words we never discussed in the margin. I slept on the couch in the back office that night. At 7 the next morning, I called Northline myself. This time, I asked for the supervisor's name before telling the story. I explained that no one except me had authority to change the account, and that any representation otherwise should be disregarded. My voice shook, but I kept going. The supervisor, a woman named Celeste, did not laugh or sigh. She said, I will note that while you are on the line. Then she waited while I wrote down the confirmation number. The missing payment was found before lunch. It had been sitting in an exception queue. Because one digit was absent from the transfer reference, the second invoice was corrected. The shipment was released for overnight delivery. The entire crisis required 2 calls, 1 receipt, and 43 minutes of my morning. I sat there looking at the confirmation number. Adrian had made the problem sound like proof that I could not function without him. It was only a problem. That distinction changed something in me. Competence is useful. It is not a crown. Struggle is real. It is not consent. Needing assistance with one difficult hour does not mean another person owns your future hours. Adrian texted around noon. Are you ready to talk like adults? I read it twice. The old version of me would have responded to the insult hidden inside the invitation. She would have tried to prove she was calm, fair, and worthy of being taken seriously. Instead, I wrote, I have spoken with Northline. The account is fixed. Do not contact any shop vendor or customer on my behalf. I will arrange a time for you to collect your things from my apartment. The typing bubble appeared immediately. It vanished, appeared again, vanished. Then the call started. I did not answer. By evening, I had 14 messages. The first said I was emotional. The second said I was humiliating him after everything he had done. The fourth said no relationship could survive without trust. The seventh said my father had trained me to protect dysfunction. The 10th said Adrian had only tried to build a future with me. The last one said, fine, enjoy doing everything alone. I almost replied to that one, not because it hurt most, because it revealed the bargain he thought I had rejected, control or abandonment. Those were the only choices he offered. Let him take over or be left alone with every burden. Healthy partnership had never been anywhere in the document. My friend Lila came to the shop that night with soup and a roll of brown packing tape. I had called her because I needed someone in the room while I changed passwords. She did not tell me whether to end the engagement. She asked me to explain the document from the beginning. When I reached the part where Adrian sighed because I wanted to read it, she set down her spoon. Stop there, she said. What? That is the part. The broad authority is the part. No, the authority is what he wanted. The sigh is how you know he did not want you to know he wanted it. I stared at her. Lila had spent 12 years managing a dental office. She had seen every form of administrative chaos a human being could invent. She believed in lists more deeply than Adrian did. She picked up the printed document and read the clause. If I wanted you to sign this, she said, I would sit beside you and explain why every word was there. I would tell you to take it home. I would want someone else to review it. I would not make reading feel like an insult to me. That was the first moment I stopped asking whether Adrian had technically intended harm. Intent had become a maze. Maybe he believed he was saving the shop. Maybe he believed I would eventually thank him. Maybe he had no plan to move a dollar anywhere improper. Maybe he simply thought love meant letting the more organized person decide. None of those possibilities restored what mattered. He had designed an agreement around my expected inattention. He had used my exhaustion as part of the process. 2 days later, he came for his things. Lila waited in the kitchen while I stood at the apartment door. Adrian looked terrible. For one dangerous second, tenderness rose before memory did. He held up the ring box. You are really ending this over paperwork? There it was, the final reduction. Paperwork. Not the authority, not the secrecy, not the anger when I read, not the way he had announced himself to a supplier before I agreed. Just paperwork, as if the pages had appeared between us by accident. No, I said. I am ending it because the document said out loud what you had started believing quietly. He asked what that meant. It meant you thought being better at something gave you the right to do it without me. I was trying to protect you. Protection I am not allowed to examine is not protection. He looked past me into the apartment. We were supposed to be a team. A team does not hide the captain in the fine print. He flinched. I did too. I had not planned the sentence. It arrived complete. He placed the ring box on the entry table and said he hoped I would realize what I had thrown away. After he left, I sat on the floor and cried until Lila joined me without speaking. Leaving did not feel triumphant. That is another thing people rarely say about seeing clearly. Clarity does not cancel love. It only removes love's ability to negotiate with what you know. For weeks, I missed Adrian everywhere. In the labeled boxes. In the shared calendar I eventually deleted. In the clean spreadsheet that still worked, even after the person who made it was gone. Good systems do not become bad because the person who built them crossed a line. Good memories do not become fake. care can be real and control can be real at the same time. That overlap is what makes certain betrayals so hard to name. If he had always been cruel, I would have left sooner. If he had been incompetent, I would never have handed him access. If every kindness had been a trick, grief would have had a simpler shape. But he had helped me. Then he had decided help entitled him to more than I offered. Both things were true. The shop survived the holiday rush. Barely. I hired a part-time bookkeeper named Wren, who asked permission before opening a cabinet. On her first day, she brought me a one-page access sheet. Every account had a box beside it. View only. Communicate. Approve purchases up to a limit. Change payment details. The last box remained unchecked. Wren slid the page toward me. Read it whenever you have time, she said. If anything feels too broad, cross it out. We can work around it. I nearly cried over the normalcy of that sentence. No sigh, no wounded performance, no demand that trust be proven through speed, just room. By spring, I had replaced my father's receipt system, retired one machine, and kept another after 3 technicians told me not to. I learned the bank portal. I made mistakes. None of them became evidence that I should stop being the person who decided. The printed document stayed in the bottom drawer beneath the counter, not because I needed it for court, not because it was enforceable without my signature, not because I wanted to keep a relic of Adrian. I kept it because page 3 reminded me how small the distance can be between relief and surrender. Sometimes it is not a locked door or a stolen password. Sometimes it is a yellow flag beside a signature box. Sometimes it is a sentence built from boring words. Sometimes it is the sound a person makes when you take too long to understand what he hopes you will give away. On the first anniversary of my father's death, I closed the shop early. I made coffee in his chipped blue mug and sat at the counter while late sunlight crossed the floor. I thought about all the things he had failed to organize and all the things he had taught me without knowing. He never trusted a proof he had not examined. Customers would hover beside him and say the invitation looked fine, the menu looked fine, the program looked fine. My father would put on his glasses and read every line anyway. Paper remembers what people rush past, he used to say. I had always thought he was talking about spelling errors. Now I knew better. Paper remembers promises. Paper remembers boundaries. Paper remembers the power someone hoped you would hand over, while trying not to seem difficult. Adrian was right about one thing. I could not run Bell Street Press on memory and sentiment forever, so I changed it. I built systems I understood. I hired people who explained. I wrote limits into every permission. I learned that asking for help is not the same as resigning from your own life. And whenever someone puts a document in front of me now, I read it slowly. Not because I trust no one, because trustworthy people never need me not to.
Thank you for watching. If this story pulled you in, do me one favour. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next one finds you the moment it drops. Remember, nothing is ever just what it seems. See you on the next one.